same words can come from two different people, and it can be extremely attractive, fun, and flirty, or creepy based on.
Episode number 70 something. 4. Here we are.
Fire away.
I watched John Adams, the 15-year-old HBO series with Paul Giamatti. And there's a lot into it because I've been into the history stuff. But one line stuck with me. It was Paul Giamatti as John Adams, second president of the United States, talking about his sons. Now, his first son, who he took away from his family, brought to Europe, and then sent on his own to Russia when he was like 13 years old, became the sixth president, John Quincy Adams. But was like, grew up alone as a foreign diplomat page, basically. Two of his other sons became alcoholics, and I believe one died from it. And just according to the show, which is I'm sure dramatized, John Adams disowned him, but I looked it up. In his writings, never spoke fondly of his sons, or like when he wrote to them was like never emotionally invested, despite the fact that he spent years living in Europe and barely wrote to his family. He was never a loving father, you might say.
John Adams was?
John Adams was not.
So
but the line,
not have a loving dad, and he was not a
loving
dad.
No. I don't know about. Okay, so John Quincy Adams. The whole show is about John Adams. He's already an adult. It doesn't show his parents at all. So I'm not sure what his upbringing was like. But the line, which he may or may not have said, it doesn't matter, was that about his son, he had every advantage. And obvious to us living in 2020, we can look at that and be like, what do you mean every advantage? You basically abandoned him. You know what I mean? Like he was raised with tutors. And of course he became an alcoholic, right? But it did get me thinking that we have the same idea today when we see like Instagram people that have everything and nonetheless are criminals or miserable or want to kill themselves. And we still have that same foolish impulse to be like, you had every advantage. It's like, clearly not. Like, clearly not. His son was an alcoholic. This person is a famaholic, and they're all super depressed. Just, I guess it made me
No, people say that Avicii killed himself, and people got it's so crazy.
He had everything.
So apparently not the things that make you want to stay alive.
Yes.
Could be health, could be family, could be close friends that aren't users. I don't know what it is.
A brain circuit that doesn't tend towards depression. It's just so we think in the face of evidence, we're convinced we know what is everything. You know what I mean? People will kill themselves and will be like, he had everything. What a shame. And it's just so funny to me that as a society, we're so bound into the idea of what we think we know makes for a good life in the face of stark evidence that people literally kill themselves having those things. But they also tend, not to kill themselves in poorer countries. Not saying that you want to be poor, but it's an interesting question. Why do we have all the suicides?
Well, dude, this is like what I've been trying to figure out. I love books like The How of Happiness, The Science of Happiness, The Book of Joy. I think we have clearly been raised with a misunderstanding of what makes us happy, and that's not necessarily to blame for just our parents, but like movies, society, school, friend groups. We have completely, if there's a formula for happiness, we have completely gotten lost in terms of what the variables are. You know what I mean? And I think it's a fascinating question. It's like, what actually makes you happy?
It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And then we've talked about this in my own life. I continue to pursue things that I have evidence don't make me happy. We've talked about, let's grow the business. Like, why? Like, the last 30% didn't matter. Like, why would I want that? Let's get the podcast larger. Why? Taking the channel
so that someone can make a mean video about it.
It's fascinating. I fall into the trap. We all do. And it was a mental note to when you see someone that is suffering and they happen to be stunningly beautiful or have something that you aspire to. For me to update my thing and go, oh, wow, being stunningly beautiful doesn't inoculate you against that and might not even help at all and might even take you away.
I'm not convinced. Like, let's say you have a kid. I'm not convinced the best thing for that kid is to be as attractive as possible. I think there's probably like a bell curve. You want them to be a little bit better looking than average. Probably, you know what I mean?
Maybe,
Like, you're looking for like, all right, you blend in, but like not bad.
And people don't hand you everything on a silver platter.
Also, let's say you're beautiful, so you get everything comes easy to you, but you don't have to develop certain skills or certain toughness or mental toughness or ability to create joy internally. And now all of a sudden, the only way you know how to get happiness is external validation. Okay, then you move to a city like LA. Now you're surrounded by people who all had that same upbringing in their small town, and you have to compete for external validation instead of just being someone who found a different way to be happy besides the approval of others in terms of your appearance.
Sure.
I'm not certain that the better looking, the better.
In LA, at the upper extremes, I'm sure that it gets in the way. Now, I'm not saying that one would wish to be born less than average attractiveness, but what you see at the top levels is it becomes all-consuming. Yeah. It is your diet, your lifestyle, your social circle, your this, and it puts you around people with that same belief. So you can't even break out of that vain circle that this is all that matters.
I would bet ideal is like one standard deviation above the mean. You know what I mean? Like it's like you're just clearly on the right of the bell curve, but you're not so far that it defined who you are.
Yeah,
that would be my guess.
We spoke, you and I, yesterday to a lawyer, and one of the we were talking about, okay, because when we made this business, it was like, okay, half of this non-existent entity is yours, half of this non-existent entity is mine. And so we were going through all of the what happens if one of us dies, what happens if this. And one of the questions is, if one of us dies, should your family get it? Like, how much do you want to guarantee to your family? And I was like, and you were like, none. Like, not the one, I don't have a family, but also I will have some life insurance if I get a family.
Yeah, that was my whole thing, was like, if I want to take care of my family, I will get life insurance.
Yeah.
I don't need them owning half of and getting to decide half of what happens with a business I created 20 years ago.
Sure.
Like now you and my wife or my children are negotiating what Charisma on Command should do.
How could it possibly, this is my view, how could it be good, say I have a son, to live in the shadow of, let's say that I amass a fortune, of a dead father with a fortune that I don't have yet, but like, let's say that I did and it was substantial, that he never had to do anything, and just had this money and depression and means now to go buy a bunch of expensive drugs and no drive to do anything. Because we all look at our own lives and we look at the difficult parts and go, man, that really shaped who I was, but I wouldn't wish that on anyone else. And it's like, why? If that was a culminating, trying it difficult experience, why wouldn't you want that for someone else? I look back and I thank God in a weird way that I had so much student loan debt, because I look at the period of my life when I was accumulating that debt and when I was living like I was rich, and I did nothing. I was drinking 5 nights a week, hanging out, goofing off. And it was only when I was like, oh my gosh, I owe $100,000 and have to work a terrible job that I'm not terrible, one that I don't like in order to pay it back. That was when I started behaving in such a way that even better things could happen than drinking 5 nights a week.
Well, and also I think 1, you don't want to live for good stories, and 2, this isn't true of everyone, but like some of the best memories we have are you like are living in a closet in a 4-bedroom apartment in Brazil that we turned into a 6-bedroom, and then Airbnb-ing the closet, sleeping on the couch because you needed the money, but having the time of our lives. And also it's a great to like have come through it on the other side. It's a great thing to look back on and be like, all right, well then that's not a death sentence. You know what I mean? To be negative 90,000 net worth with no income was like a peak experience in your life, which probably helps with your fear of poverty relative to somebody who has never had it and therefore thinks it's a death sentence and therefore can't quit their job to start a business.
And I want to be clear, like I was never impoverished. The nice thing, and I think that there's a Goldilocks zone that culture teaches you to aim far above. But the Goldilocks zone for me was, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would not starve to death and I wouldn't have to sleep outside. I also knew that my actions would not cause anyone I loved to starve or have to sleep outside. That said, renting out my bed, sleeping on wooden floors with blankets, or you know what I mean? Like it wasn't torture. I was inside and climate controlled.
I had a 6-bedroom with 5 other friends, and then you moved in and slept on a cot on the floor next to my bed. Like, and this extreme poverty is bad. I'm not
poverty is bad. That's not poverty.
I'm not trying to diminish people's experience. Like if you don't know where your meal is coming from, if you feel unsafe, that's all bad. And I think even everything I've studied with happiness would say there is a level that you need in terms of certainty of safety, shelter, food, water, right? So I'm not saying that if you don't have access to those things, buck up, kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were sleeping on the floor on a cot, and we're like unclear if your rent being $400 for my roommates who didn't like you being there was gonna impact your life or not. But it was great. It was fine. Whatever. We figured it out. Like, I think that, so once you get above that safety level of wealth, some of the best memories and also like most growth comes from the desire to get out of the lower level of I can't afford anything and into creating something.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I suspect that's one of the hardest parts of being a parent, is allowing, because this last generation, everybody talks, didn't get that. Had the helicopter parent that insisted they got the trophy for 5th place, you know, that intervened on their behalf when they were being bullied at school. The desire to jump in and make it smooth sailing for your kid, I can imagine, is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And
well, I had smooth sailing, but somewhere in my brain was just burrowed a seed of like, if you are a do nothing, you have to hate yourself.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I mean, you got beat up on occasion, right? Like it wasn't.
Yeah. I guess I get confused on what
it's gone. It's gone even more. Now we were in the history of the world, we're some of the most coddled people ever, right? You and I.
Yes.
But there's been even more since our generation.
I probably got beat up like 6 times in school from
no broken bones.
3rd grade to junior year in high school.
And there were no broken bones.
6 fights, of which I maybe won 1. But it wasn't looking good. Maybe that's why I got into MMA.
Yeah. Wanted to win.
Yeah. It fucking sucks, man. So yeah, I guess I wasn't like, I'm not a trust fund baby. There's such a big spectrum from like growing up in the hood in danger. I'm as far from that as you can get. But then I guess there's like the billionaire parent where you never
I'm speaking to the people who, like us, are talking to lawyers to ensure continuity of the legacy, which is, in my opinion, you've gone too far. When you have generated generational wealth, and you could see this, it doesn't help people. Yeah. Like they live in these shadows of what the people who came before them did, with this implicit assumption that they'll never break out, they'll always be there. And then they often, because of that, have to go hard the other way and just underperform, nothing, find a way to not give back. And that's not true of everybody. But it was just such an interesting conversation when the lawyer was talking to us, being like, you guys are crazy. You're gonna have a family one day. I was like, I get it. I know. And I really just want to make sure that they have enough for a solid food, shelter, public education, and not millions of dollars should I be gone. And even if I'm there, then that's a question. Let's say that you're earning like lots of money. I'm not saying I'm going to be earning millions of dollars, but let's say that you do. Do you fly your kids first class on vacation to the Bahamas? Like, I don't even know how one makes those decisions. Maybe, I haven't thought about really having a kid, but yeah, I don't know. What do you do? Do you take them to all the nice restaurants all the time and show them the greatest things before they're 10 years old and have that just be an expectation of what the world is? I have no idea. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I have put zero thought into how to raise a kid.
Okay. We can move along.
Of all the books I've ever read about fitness and wealth creation and happiness, child rearing has never cracked the list.
Yeah. I've truly no idea. But anyway.
Can I segue on here, though?
Sure.
So speaking of people with their baseline needs, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who donated to our charity water campaign so far. It's awesome. We said we were going to match, and so we just sent in $45,000 to Charity Water because we had $45,000 donated by people who watch Charisma on Command and who watch this podcast, and I think that's awesome. So I just want to say thank you guys, because that does go to helping 10-year-old kids not get mouth tumors because they're drinking dirty water. It helps people have a baseline quality of life that lets them live and pursue goals and achieve what's the highest part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's not fulfillment. It's self-actualization. Yeah. So it's awesome. Thank you, everyone. If people want to keep donating, we're going to match again at the end of the year. So you can go to charitywater.org/charisma. But I just wanted to shout out because I wrote the check to match. I was like, oh man, $45,000 from our viewers and listeners. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, you guys are awesome. Thank you, everybody. That is certainly on the side of poverty that is too far, that is not romantic, that I do not wish upon people, or my kids, or anybody. So that one is so obviously to help if you can, and if you're moved to do so. This is a huge segue. Pfizer.
Oh, I wanted to talk about Pfizer.
Vaccine, dude.
The best. Corona's over. I gotta stop saying that. Sorry, I keep getting us demonetized. Bleep that out.
You're fine. I think you could say it now.
I don't know.
Corona's safe now.
Corona's safe now. I mean, in more ways than one. So the question that you and I have been discussing is, this comes out on the Friday. The election was on Monday or Tuesday?
Yep. Tuesday.
Clearly, these trials had been going on. They could have hinted at it before. good news would have been good news for Donald Trump because he was in the debate saying we're weeks away. And I remember listening, being like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no way. No, and it was the biggest weapon against him was Corona, how you handled it, and the fact that it's going to be around for a while. We need a president who will handle it.
And then an American company hasn't broken through yet.
Yeah.
So they clearly waited till after the election. I don't think there's any question that they couldn't have talked about this 7 days prior and had it perhaps a dramatic influence on the election.
And my questions immediately were, did they do this because it makes them the most money to wait till after the election? Did they do it because they have an agenda where they wanted Biden to win?
Mm-hmm.
I was very confused about why they waited.
Do you have any insight? Because
I sure do.
Okay.
So I went digging, and in the middle of August, just so people know, CEOs of public companies can't decide to trade their stocks day of, because it's to prevent...
Day of what?
Day of anything. To prevent insider trading.
Day of news? Day of...
If I want to sell stock, I have to announce it like 7 weeks prior.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if Charisma Monkman's public and I want to sell, I cannot just wait till the stock goes up and then be like, hey, sell everything. I have to announce in a public document
I understand
when I will sell. And that is to prevent insider trading. So on August, I forget, I think it was like 9th or 19th, the CEO of Pfizer announced that he would be selling over half of his shares on November 9th.
Wow.
And the day they made the announcement was November 9th. So my new hedge fund that I'll be starting is going to comb through public documents. And anytime the CEO plans to sell over half of his shares, we buy call options for the week that it happens.
So your hypothesis there is that in August, he knew that 1, the election is happening, so let's wait till after the election. And 2, that's pretty much as soon as I can tell, but he had indications that this vaccine was working, you think?
I think that he delayed the announcement until the day his stocks were set
So
to
you're
share.
saying in August he knew that this stuff was working, that it had strong promise.
Yes, but even beyond that, I'm saying I bet they could have announced on November 7th, and his stock was set to sell November 9th.
And so they waited.
And they waited till November 9th to announce it.
But wait, why wouldn't you do that? Why not take the bump?
Because Pfizer's stock went up and then came back down. Because the headline was...
Oh, so he sold it the day
If you
bump.
look at the 12-month high, let's say it's $42 a share.
Yeah.
He sold for $41.95, and they're now at $37.
Oh gosh,
Those
so
might not be the actual
he hit
numbers,
like
but-
the peak on the announcement day, which then, unfortunately, reflects rather poorly on his confidence in this vaccine,
well,
right?
Well, here's why. Because what happened was the vaccine announcement comes out. It's 90% effective. Oh my God, we're going to cure Corona. Stock goes up. And then later, because there's details, the vaccine needs to be kept at a certain temperature to be effective. I think it's like negative 70 degrees.
Wow.
So you have to package it with dry ice and stuff.
Which is
And so
expensive.
they just aren't sure how. They'll do it. Like, they don't need to wait for another vaccine. If this was 100% effective, they'd figure out how to transport it at the right temperature.
Mm-hmm.
But it might have an impact in terms of how far and wide it can be distributed. Maybe they'll have to share it with other pharmaceutical companies. It might have an impact just in terms of timing. Maybe we thought this was going to come out in January, but now we need an extra couple months to figure out distribution. Regardless, the big announcement was 90% effective. That happens November 9th, the day the CEO is set to sell 50% of his shares.
Mm-hmm.
And then the subsequent people digging in occurs afterwards. You know what I mean? They're like, well, give us the details, release the study.
He likely knew a lot of this when he made his announcement.
If not, he got extremely lucky.
What a lucky guy.
The one thing I haven't looked into, which I will give him the benefit of the doubt, there is a world where the CEO sells the same number of shares every quarter. So you start with 1,000 shares.
I understand.
Then you get down to 900, 800, 700. And when you sell from 200 to 100, it looks like you sold 50% of your shares.
Yeah.
But really, you've been selling the same amount. That might be the case. I just didn't care to keep digging.
Yeah.
But even if that's the case, for sure, there was some acknowledgement on his part that we should line up this announcement with the day I have already pre-committed to sell my
selling
shares.
shares. That does, presuming that it's not what you had talked about, which is this cascading effect of sell-offs, and it was a chosen thing.
Benefit of the doubt, it might be.
I'm not trying to indict this guy. I'm just trying to say it does. Then, if you want to be in Pfizer, that means that you believe that the stock is undervalued, which means that they might be the only people that can make a vaccine that the entire world needs, and they have a patent on it and can distribute it or at least license that patent. The fact that you would want to exit that company isn't the best sign for the profits of Pfizer and the value of this vaccine. I'm not saying,
I mean, almost anytime a CEO sells a major amount of shares, the shares go down because people say this guy doesn't have confidence in the company going forward.
Great. Okay.
Is it true? I haven't looked. Is it true that CNN's website no longer has the death count on it?
I have no idea.
I saw that in our YouTube comments, but I didn't verify. They were just like, what a coincidence that now the Biden wins. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is true.
Yeah.
I wasn't checking CNN's website before to see if there ever was a death count.
I can't verify that either the
No, that's what I was just asking
after.
you guys.
So this is mildly connected. Reinventing Organizations, I told you to check out, and it's connected to the CEO selling off all of his shares. Really, to me, very interesting book. The premise is almost the most interesting part, and then the suggestions are intriguing. The premise of Reinventing Organizations is that the way that humans band at any stage in human evolution reflects an underlying belief about human nature and a metaphor, and the limitations of technology. So you go back, 10,000 years. Well, one, you can't band together more than like a couple hundred people because communication is very difficult. Second, you're very likely to have a strong tribal figurehead who is just powerful. And when it comes to, are we going to have a meritocracy? That hasn't even occurred to people yet. It's like, it's going to be me, and then I choose my son, and then I'll decide up how the spoils go, and you'll do what I say, and if I want you out, you're out. So that's one form of organization. Then with agriculture, you get these sort of religious and military type organizations that are hierarchical with roles. So you've got the Pope, you've got the bishops, beneath them you've got the priests, and the power is not just in the individual who is the chief, who can be killed and then somebody else can take that over. It's you can ascend through these hierarchies by doing specific things, and the power is not necessarily in the individual, so it's in the role, which tends to make for more stability because there's clear rules of succession, even if that succession is dynastical and it's hereditary.
Sure, if you're at the very bottom and you murder the Pope, you're not becoming Pope.
You're not the Pope.
It's not like, so there's less incentive to kill the Pope.
Exactly.
Like, listen, if you kill the Pope, an archbishop.
Then we just have to do the thing with the smoke, and we vote, and so we get all that.
Incentive now.
So now it becomes a more stable structure, but it still has clear understanding, which is the Pope is the genius at the top. He's literally the vicar of God. He's speaking with God's voice, and then
so what he says goes.
Yeah, and people beneath him have less authority until at the bottom it's just the people who must, it's the church people who have to listen to the Latin reading of the Bible and trust that that's the case and basically do as they're told and tithe. That then evolves to what we are most familiar with in America today, which is meritocracy, which is to say you can actually leap steps. You can, if you're good enough to get ahead, very individualistic. You still have nepotism in the system, but it's a bad thing. Whereas before, it's like, of course, my son is going to be the guy. The way to get ahead is by achieving, competing, winning. Go ahead.
We recognize that you'll lose. If you run an oil company and I run an oil company and you put your son in and I put the best person I have in to replace us, there's an understanding in society that I will beat you because I have the best guy, which wasn't the case. At one point, it just, of course, the sons will be the best person for the role. You know what I mean?
And I think accurately what it suggests is that part of what allowed this type of an organization to exist is there's a ton of technological advancements, but one of them is the fact that machines began to exist and that machines formed a metaphor for how an organization can work. And you hear it, inputs and outputs and cogs. And it's the entire thing that Karl Marx was talking about where people become rote, how efficient can we make this guy at hammering this piece, passing it off to the next guy on the assembly line. So people then become alienated from their labor, whereas before in previous structures, they were more holistic. The priest had a relationship with people. It's like, no, now the priest, like, there's one priest for the cookie. This hasn't happened in the church yet. And then one priest for the confession. And it's just an assembly line thing. Highly efficient, has created a lot of the things that we enjoy today. And what this book suggests is that is a very limited way of organizing, and that given human advancement and technology, we are capable of a different metaphor, which was the metaphor of an organism, with big differences being that instead of having that hierarchical meritocratic nature where basically at the top you have the brain, all decisions need to flow through the C-suite, and then there's this cascading thing down, and there's some sensory inputs like you can, it's an open door policy. Feel free to come into my office and then I'll make the decision about what happens, that you can distribute more power to the what has traditionally been the bottom of the organization, and the top of the organization now is just in the coach role. Less authority becomes distributed, power becomes distributed. Concretely, this looks like anybody in the organization can start the process of hiring someone else. They can start the process of firing someone else by committee. They can start, they can do a huge purchase order. They can redefine their job and be like, I'm not really effective here on the factory floor. I'm going to go scout out new factories in Antarctica or whatever it is. So there's obvious rules and structures that need to be put in place so that it doesn't devolve into anarchy. But I thought it was super interesting because it really made me reflect on how we do things and how most businesses do things that I think is messed up. So
I think it sounds nice in theory, and I think that there's things about it that could probably improve a business, but I have two pushbacks because I started reading it as well. It, to your point, it likes metaphor, right? So the metaphor that it will use is the brain has 8 trillion neurons and no one neuron is better than the others. They all work together, right? Same thing with your, whatever it might be, like the forest, you know, no tree tells other trees where to grow. It's this very complex thing. There are not, I believe, more talented neurons than others in the brain, to our understanding at least. They're all like relatively equally talented. And in humans, you have a spectrum from incredibly talented to not particularly talented. And so I think if you're going to run a business like the brain, one, you have to not have any people who lack talent. But two, I wonder if Apple, for instance, would have performed as well if not for the fact that Steve Jobs was the clear leader. Because I think even upon his death, the company has lost some of its innovation and its ability to kind of conquer the world. You know what I mean? And that business was very hierarchical. He founded it. He left. It kind of fell apart. He came back. And so I wonder if there's a way to structure yourself so that employees or people you're leading, even if it's not a business, are empowered, love the mission, feel connected to what they're doing, but you'd have set up a system that acknowledges like some of these people are Steve Jobs. And some of them are
so just
not.
read. You got to just read a little bit more of the book. It'll cover this. So, to the second point first, which is, these prior organizations have been run this way and have been successful, and when you take it away, totally agree. The same argument could be made for, well, that's true of the church. That's true of this tribe that lasted for a long time.
But there's no business run like this yet that has come to be the size of a hierarchical organization.
Well,
right?
This is the other thing. Why is big better? So that's big machines are better. Are huge, should an organism grow infinitely? Is that good? So this is actually my favorite assumption. There's two that I love in here that have made me go, oh my gosh. One, why be bigger? We've just talked about how like we have these weird incentives. Be healthier, be more connected to the people that you like, have faster flows of information and feel really connected, but bigger, forget that. And the other thing that I thought was fascinating is implicitly, people want to grow their market share in business. They want to dominate more of the market, or if there is no market, they want to create a market. It's like, why? The entire underpinning of why people pay you money is because they have a problem and they need you to help. Wouldn't you want to, at some point, like there's a cresting where you start shrinking the market? Like there's no longer a market for smallpox vaccines, or there's no longer a market. And kind of what we would like is to live in a world, you and I, eventually, where there was a shrinking market for charisma and confidence, because that problem had been taken care of, and not in a way where you needed to continue to buy from me to continue to get your fix, which is what's baked into every organization. How can we get them on a subscription product? How can we sell them a pill that they need every day, or a software that they have to use? People aren't trying to solve problems. They're trying to create addicts in business. This is planned obsolescence. Your first flip phone just lasted. Now you got to get a new iPhone every single day. And they don't make your life any better. And the market is exploding for technology.
I actually think there are companies that focus on solving a problem and rely greatly on their one guy. I just think of anything Elon Musk has ever
100%.
done. Like Elon
100%.
does Tesla. He releases, it's open source in terms of like, hey, let's get this problem solved. He seems to be very mission driven. I don't think Elon is trying to make himself wealthy as his number one goal. I think those companies succeed because he's so deferred to. You know what I mean?
So I don't know, but he has said that he spends 1% of his time on the Boring Company. for instance. So we can't be that involved.
Mm-hmm.
And they have made huge strides in the drilling of tunnels and the uptime of the drills. And I don't know a ton about it. I suspect that Elon, workaholic that he is, and I don't think he's set up an organization like this one, would tell you that there's a little bit of the hero syndrome going on in his organization where and he plays into it. He'll be the figurehead so that every talented scientist in the world will come work for him.
No, and the parts that I like from what I've seen of the book is the idea that so many people just go to work to make money.
Yeah.
They don't care about their mission at all. What company they work for doesn't matter. If they got offered more money to go to a competitor, they would. And if they got offered more money to go to a different industry, they would. You know what I mean? Like they're not working at JCPenney because they love the idea of providing clothing for people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or helping people select their
I think that
tie.
is something that ought to change. I think that when you have people who are tied to the mission and feel fulfilled, they will produce more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you give people more autonomy, some of them will over deliver in a way that is 10 times more than they would have if restricted. I agree with all that.
Mm-hmm.
I just also think that there's probably something to the fact that there's a talent discrepancy amongst humans.
So I agree, and I'm not. This is to add nuance to all of that. At my job that I was at for a year and a half, I was at the lower half of the talent pool.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to be, and it's not like and it's also, it's not that I couldn't have been good at Excel, and it's not that the idea of helping the government save money was uninspiring to me.
You have a borderline genius IQ. You're not who I'm talking about.
Well, thank you. No,
you're not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about, let's say that you run a company and you have people who work at the front lines who have struggle to problem solve in the sense that they do not perform well on tests that are meant to measure your problem solving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that there's a reason that people set up the manager system. And I don't think it's because when you have the straight A student with the borderline genius IQ, he shouldn't be unleashed a little bit. And I don't think that you were maximized because you didn't care about the mission at all. It was just a job, paycheck, come in, come out. But what I'm saying is in the realm of which brain cell has the most potential, you would not be on the bottom 20%.
I 100% agree that within individuals, one, it's also related to a particular skill set, because I have no potential as a wide receiver. You know what I mean? So there's somebody out there that has no potential in our organization or other ones that are cognitive, but can do things that I couldn't come close to in other venues. But I will give you another example. While totally understanding that we have differential potentials cognitively, physically, all that kind of stuff, my brother, who had learning disabilities growing up, struggled to grasp reading when he was in his 3.5 year of college, was on the 5 or 6 year plan, not by planning, but by the grades that he was getting at a Temple University. Came with us to Brazil, was surrounded by a different group of people, and for years didn't really show much jumping out of that. And it was only with the right combination of financial support plus financial pressure, which is like, hey, here's some, but not an infinite amount. And you have to take this job that you hate, by the way. Being around people that were doing things and osmosising and a little bit of questions, but honestly, no one really coached him at any point, is now doing very well. I think that people, and I think myself included, people, I don't think I'm a genius, but people that have done well on tests, all these, I'm hugely a product of my circumstances, but I will not deny that there's genetic influences that I are different in people. So I just think that you can create contexts in which far greater numbers of people are capable of successes that would really surprise you.
I agree.
Yeah.
Just within an organization that had no hierarchy, you'd I mean, I could see a world where Steve Jobs gets kicked out because he's a dick.
Well, he was kicked out because
that's what I'm saying.
But also, it's not that there's no hierarchy. Just to be clear, it's that hierarchy. It's not a organizational predetermined hierarchy. It emerges, and it's fluid in terms of. And unfortunately, there's going to be problems with this. There's going to be hierarchies in these organizations that are purely based on charisma and who you talk to and politicking. I mean, that's definitely going to happen. Some guy's really smooth, tells great stories. Oh, let's not fire him. But no, it does talk about how not every voice is heard, but they're not all counted equally. It's not like one person, one vote democracy when it comes to doing things.
Why not?
Because
the system prevents that, or people's self-interest prevents that?
So I think that there are, this is what I'm trying to wrap my head around, because we've done this. We've gone both ways. We're like, we read the machine book, the E-Myth, right? Yeah. We're like, businesses are machines. People need processes. Write everything in a standard operating procedure. And no, that does not work. And we talked about how that guy in his second book acknowledges as much. Yeah. And it should take, there's a time for standard operating procedures. And that's when it comes to how long you should be cooking burgers or doing very simple tasks. It is not, and there's checklists for making videos, but there's no standard operating procedure for making a YouTube video. And I don't think there ever will be. So we've gone that way. And then I've also just tried like, hey guys, I trust you. I'm going to take a couple days off, like do whatever you want. That doesn't work either. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to identify, and he talks about them, the structures, culture, communication, and I think technology is a big piece of it that needs to be put in place so that it's not just a free-for-all of consensus opinion making, which he even acknowledges, like consensus is the enemy. Having everybody vote and agree on everything, that's not how stuff gets done in the body. Your red blood cell and your neuron do not equally get a vote on whether I snap. It's like, no, that is the role of a specialized system. So I don't know how those things emerge, but it is not as rigid as you might say meritocracy is, which is even less rigid than the prior church-like system. So it's more fluid. I could be at the top of one hierarchy, but I make the hiring calls. Why do I make the hiring calls? I have no expertise in this. And it like that's something that would flow to someone that had proven better than me.
Yeah.
So we can play with it. I'm not gonna...
I don't know how in the weeds you want to get, but like that's actually not true. That's not how we got our virtual customer support people. They hired themselves. We had one virtual customer support person who hired another one who hired a third one.
Which is good. But that's actually what I actually think we have elements of this built in. We're not totally there by any means. And there's a couple things specifically, I don't want to talk too much about our business, but one thing that I realize that we need to do, and I know you will agree with me, is sit down, everybody in a room as often as you want, invitation only, do not have to be there. And I'm going to talk about the business from top to bottom. I'm going to talk about the numbers. I'm going to talk about how it works. I'm going to talk about how this piece works with this piece so that people are not as alienated from the bigger structure, which leads to poor decision making, lack of feeling like you're involved with something important. So we could talk about the specifics offline, but I did think that the piece that people might be interested in is it made me question what assumptions about human nature I have. Mm-hmm. And one of them is that, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's that I think I overvalued past behavior and didn't factor in context enough. Mm. And I think if I had been as judgmental of myself as I have been of employees that have lied or stolen from us, and I'm not saying that I want to hire them back, but like if I look at myself in my first job where I was saying that I was working more hours than I was, it's like I would have never hired me for this role, so that people can be different when given different levels of autonomy, control, and interest in what they do.
For sure. Honestly, my biggest pushback so far with the whole thing is his point is, and I think he would actually agree with what I'm about to say. The author says we always just go with the latest technology. This is also true of the human brain. Like we used to metaphor that humans were like carts, like with horses, and now we metaphor that they're like computers.
Yep.
And they just aren't. Like we're just capped. And I think he said organizations used to be looked at like they were blank, and now they're looked at like they're machines. And then he uses metaphors like the brain. Mm-hmm. And all I would say is just throw all of that out, because we are not the brain. We are not neurons. We are not equally capable of firing messages off at the same speed. We do not have identical shapes. We did not come from splitting in half. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So just forget the metaphor altogether. Don't try to create a business that looks like a brain. Just say we have people and we have no idea what paradigm works best, but let's figure it out. You know what I mean? And kind of start from scratch. And I think he would actually say, just use the metaphors because they're convenient.
Well, one thing, it's not that brain, it's organism. And I think one of the things you're talking about how the neurons are the same. He talks about an organism, which is like your brain has a level of control over parts of your body.
I would just say throw that out though. A business is not a human organism. It's not a machine. it's also not a human organism. A human organism is a human organism. And like, it's not a forest. And I think to the extent that you try to look at a forest and then structure your business and the people in it like a forest, you're just better off going, okay, let's pretend I have let's just pretend I have human resources and I want to get the most out of them to solve a problem, helping people with charisma or helping sick people. You know what I mean? Because I think in the same way that thinking of them as cogs in a machine is bad, I suspect that when you try to make them look like vegetation in a forest, you'll just miss.
Totally. I think metaphor is inescapable, for instance. That's why he would say, let's try to get a better metaphor, because you're like human resources to try to get out. That's still a very mechanistic view of it. Like, I have a human resource and I want a result. Like, you cannot escape the fact that you're going to be viewing. And I agree. It's not a body. It's not a forest. It's none of those things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you try to
totally
make this look like a forest or a human body, you'll just get it wrong.
Yes. It's just slightly better is, I think, what it might be, is that you're stuck in metaphor. You're like, it's not. The universe is too freaking complicated to say it's anything other than what it appears to us as. But these models they can help you move in the right direction, and eventually they will need to be discarded. And he's also not totally crapping on the machine model, which got us all of these awesome things and higher productivity, and everybody's got a car and a phone and a thing and a this and a that. But yeah, I agree. I will not make us slaves to a metaphor. I will use it to question and understand the pre-existing metaphors that drive some of my assumptions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm reading it. It's cool. If you have a business, you might like it. But
is it useful at all if you don't run a business?
If you work in a business, you might be like, hey, these types of businesses are existing. And I didn't think I would ever be an entrepreneur, but that doesn't mean that I can't be highly engaged with my work, have a tremendous amount of power within an organization to shape my work and do interesting things. And the organizations that he talks about, one of them is a Dutch, it's nurses, that the way that the healthcare system works in the Netherlands is that nurses show up to your house. And so it's like, these are not the most necessarily tech savvy, sophisticated organizations. One of them builds car parts. One of them is nurses. There's a school in there. So yeah, you might just be interested in like, holy cow, I don't like my job. I don't want to be an entrepreneur, but maybe I could find something a little bit more like this.
Any American companies?
Yes, there's a tomato company. Nice. They make tomato paste. And he says, it's like, this one is a little bit more like a factory line, but anybody can initiate the firing process of anybody. Anybody can initiate the hiring process. The way salaries are chosen is fascinating. And it's actually what we've done with one person in our company, which is we sit down and we go, what do you think you've earned? He throws out a number. We say, this is what we think, and they're complicated, but we actually walk away, I think both parts being like, okay, I could deal with this, and you feel that you're being compensated and you understand how. So something like that could make its way farther into the organization. Maybe not all the way, maybe not immediately, but that kind of stuff is what they have.
Sure. I'm also just always cautious to jump into a book after the E-Myth burn.
Sure.
So I'm just like, we were 100% convinced SOPs were the answer, and now being 100% convinced that being a forest is the answer is just like, I'll just do this slowly.
Yes.
Because there's a chance that this guy is wrong.
Yes. And the last piece, which I did think was interesting, is that it's just the spiritual question is, and there's not a right or a wrong answer. It's just illuminating. Is love or fear guiding this decision? And fear is appropriate. If a lion is roaring at you, you're like, love would make me hug him. Fear can be the appropriate one, but fear of being taken advantage of, I think, drives so many decisions, and probably more than it needs to. And it's okay to get burned sometimes to open yourself up to the possibility of huge wins.
Well, that's something I try to ask in personal relationships.
Yeah.
I think that forgetting if it's fear or love, because I think there's a lot of emotions, but I go, am I coming from love right now? I mean, even when firing someone, like let's say that somebody has screwed up a bunch.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they have to go because they can't be here, but you can come in and be like, hey man, I'm noticing you're screwing up a bunch. Like, is something going on? Is a family member sick? Is a family member dying? Like, at the end of the conversation, you still can't work here, but I can ask you as a human, and dating, it's the same thing. Like, you don't have to stay with someone, but you can break up with them without hating them. Just being like, listen, you had whatever life you had has created you. You're not right for me. but I'm going to come from love in the sense that like you're perfect for you. You know what I mean? So actually, that's one I've always liked, or not always liked. As of like 2 years ago, I started to really like, am I coming from a place of love while I do this? But I think people get confused and think that makes you a pushover. But it's not true. You can break up, you can fire, you can end a business deal, but you just come from a place of.
Well, weirdly, sometimes fear is what keeps you from ending the business deal, breaking up, saying the hard thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sometimes love is the on its surface more direct, more confrontational way of being, and fear is the I just won't say anything. I think that is write it out.
Often surprisingly the case. If you can truly get to a place where you're coming from love, you end up doing what's better for your happiness more often.
Yep. So my last one.
Okay. And then I have one more too.
You lied to me. This was just a small thing that had happened, but you were doing calls for a job that we're looking to hire for. And one of the references was apparently someone that we bumped into in Brazil 8 years ago and said hi to. And then there was another one that was, I forget exactly what the other thing was, but it was like one of those random 8-year-old small acts of kindness where somebody remembered and took a meeting. And I was struck, and it's happening increasingly. And I guess I just am saying this for those of you who are not yet 30 plus years old, or like, it's been weird how decades old tiny little behaviors of like saying hi, being friendly to someone who at this time in Brazil had nothing to offer us and we had nothing to offer them, but just being kind made him take. This is a guy who doesn't take calls. He's been successful in business. He doesn't need to. He doesn't talk to anybody, but he took the call and he helped us with a thing, and we actually might work together because he's into ayahuasca, which is kind of why he's off doing his own thing. But
I remember the other one. It was when I was in college, I was trying out for different fraternities, and I ended up getting invited to a couple of fraternities. A lot of my friends went to one, but I went to another that I thought was a better fit. But I still wanted to go hang out with those friends of mine from freshman year. Everyone that was a year older than us, except for a couple of guys, was a huge dick to me because they felt very spurned, right? But one guy was just kind. Nothing crazy, no story to write home about, but every time I saw him, he was just as friendly as he was when I was rushing the fraternity. Fast forward 13 years, and Jordan Belfort's team hit us up about going onto his podcast and having him on our podcast. And at first, I was a little bit skeptical of if it was legit or if they were going to ask for something else. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to take the meeting. I was like, okay, I'll take the meeting, but I'm just going to see what their sales pitch is because they're the sales guys. But I was very skeptical. And he was on the call. And immediately, I was more receptive to what they wanted to do. And it was because 13 years prior, he had been kind to me. You know what I mean? And I even said on the call, I was like, great. It was a great call to have him on this call because I am instantly receptive to you guys in a way that I was not prior. And I don't think he did it for that reason. I don't think he could have seen the down the fairway or whatever you want to call it, trickle down effects of the kindness. But yeah, I mean, I have a high opinion of this person because of something that happened a very long time ago. You know what I mean?
And I think it's becoming, karma and like things coming back to you, it was totally real in the tribal times because these are the 150 people that you're going to see all the time. So like, be nice. Then we got to a period, I don't know how long ago, where we evolved out of that. And you move cities and you're disconnected and you can start over and burn people over again or be kind and it won't come back to you. We're getting that same scale, but there's a reconnectedness that is occurring with LinkedIn and all these kind of things and who knows who and seeing people on the internet where that karma, that simple kindness stuff is reasserting its way back into your life from people that have become far flung. And this isn't the reason to be kind, but I guess just a reminder that in both of these situations, the act of kindness was literally, hey man, what's up? Good to talk to you. Like, yeah, have a great time in Brazil. Hope that that was it. It was nothing over the top.
Oh, hey man, nice to see you. Oh yeah, you're looking for Tim? He's downstairs. That's it. That's the level of kindness we're talking. Just not being a dick.
But crazy. And I think, and I've seen it happen increasingly as I've gotten older. And I think it's probably going to accelerate because that's been the speed of it. And I'm sure that there's things that we've missed for times that we were not kind, for times that we were rude to people and we've reached out and they're no longer interested. And so there's a long distance between reaping what you sow and you're constantly doing it. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you don't know how it'll play out. It might play out 10 years later, you know?
Yep.
My last one. I'm doing a video potentially on Craig Ferguson. So I'm doing a lot of research on Craig Ferguson. He appears to be universally liked. Even today, his comments are largely positive. People, I miss him, blah, blah, blah. Could his show exist in 2020?
No.
For those of you who don't know Craig Ferguson, he tons of sexual innuendo in a way that his guests almost always seem to enjoy in a very safe, playful way. He's married. No scandals came out from the show. Could he make the same fun, beloved show today?
I do not think so. And
Isn't
I'll
that
add
a bummer?
Yeah, well, I just watched a Daniel Tosh episode and I was like, this cannot be on the air. The running gag he does the web redemptions is that there was a 17-year-old girl on a cruise ship and the gag is that she's hot and he wants to sleep with her. And she's 17, but
Okay.
it's international waters. So it's totally cool now, you know, and goodbye. Goodbye career, goodbye all of this. And Daniel Tosh already got shut down for a joke. But it's Craig Ferguson couldn't do it. And it's strange because...
Well, Daniel Tosh is controversial. I actually would throw him out for the sake of this conversation because some people hate him. Some people find him very offensive.
Yes, and he's purposely told many upsetting jokes in the past.
So I would throw him out. He's a bit of he's trying to toe the line.
He's being edgy.
What's appropriate. Craig Ferguson, all of his guests, I love being on here. They come back 6-7 times. Like there's just a sense that he's doing something people like to watch and like to participate in.
I would be willing to bet that there was someone who didn't like it.
Well, it even makes making this video hard because there's advice that you have to couch because even though it's good flirting advice, people might not recognize that it's good. It's useful when flirting with 80% of the population, but not 20% of the population. And that's okay. 20% of people are allowed to not like you. You can say a joke that people don't enjoy. That happens all the time in non-sexual relationships too. We do not no one is universally liked. Even the nicest, kindest person aggravates someone. You're a woman who's as kind as could be, but a bit of a try-hard. And we just found out that someone hates her because she was just trying to be liked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, I think it's totally fine if you have something that you have in your personality that 80% of people enjoy and 20% don't enjoy.
That's no longer okay on television.
But I can't say that in the video. You know what I mean? Or I feel restricted. I can say whatever I want. But to say, oh yeah, do this, and you know, most people are gonna laugh and love it, but there's some part of the population that won't like it. And by the way, just that's the end of the conversation. Like don't continue pursuing that part of the population.
Well, I guess as I sit here, easy for me to say as I sit here and it's your voice, but it is, you know, the channel that we share. I want to encourage you to tell the truth as best you can.
Well, the thing is, I'm going to make 100%, or I'm going to try to make 100% of the video be good advice. But the thing is, am I going to include 100% of the good advice I could give based on Craig? No. I'll just tell you straight up, I'm not. You know what I mean? So that's the interesting realm I find myself in when making this video.
There has to be, at some point, I believe, a pendulum swing back. And I guess it's just nice to be on the tip of the spear when you're going in the other direction. So
Sure.
So I'm not saying that you have to go crazy, but I would just put it in your brain that if it is true that you can give good advice, and there's realms of, you know, you don't need to talk about sex in its explicit, you know, here's the dynamics of how to be a good sexual partner or anything like that.
No, but okay, let's talk about that. Flirting can go very well if you steer the conversation towards sex. It can also feel very creepy if you put the conversation towards sex. So there's a way in which one does it, and I think Craig does it very well. But when you tell 200,000 people to do that, some of them will do it poorly, especially in the process of learning how to do it well. Like a lot of them do it poorly. So you're creating these people who will go out and like eventually get good at this, but the first time they do it, they'll say something that people find creepy or off-putting. And then the question is, are you advocating for creepy behavior? It's like, no, I'm advocating for this thing that Craig does, which is largely extremely charming.
You know what's interesting is that
because he makes every conversation, he bangs it towards the topic of sex.
I've watched Craig, and what I would say is that what he does well is he makes it their idea. You know, he
not every time, some of the time.
Sometimes he comes in with strong innuendo.
That's the safe advice. That's the advice that can go in the video. But there's other times that he just fucking
brings up sex,
just forces
And
sex.
it's in an uncomfortable.
Sorry, not forces sex. Forces the conversation of sex.
Sure. So I think what's interesting is if you think what does creepy mean? Because creepy is a feeling that in this case women get without necessarily much rational. It's just a feeling that comes up.
And I think everyone, not everyone, sorry. I think a large portion of both men and women would agree that the same words can come from two different people, and it can be extremely attractive, fun, and flirty, or creepy based on looks, social status, delivery, confidence, clothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that both men and women would say, yeah, the same sentence can get said, and it can either be creepy or it can be charming.
And this is the difficult thing, is that if creepy is, which I interpret it to be, it's an unwanted sexual advance. But what makes it unwanted isn't that that person hates sexual advances or could never be interested in a sexual advance from a person of that particular look. It's that the self-confidence that is said, the delivery, the playfulness, the environment, all of those other things.
I think it's huge. Yeah. I mean, and again, I would list their look, their status, like some combination, and you don't need all these things, but some combination of looks, status, confidence, delivery, that's voice intonation, what you're wearing, like the setting.
Exactly.
That's what defines the sentence being perceived as creepy or charming. And there's some sentences that are just always creepy, but like, I remember we have a
There's not. There are no sentences that are always creepy.
Can I say we have a friend who is a very strong feminist.
Yeah.
And she once met a guy whose first line was, you have amazing lips. I bet you give great blowjobs.
Yeah.
In a vacuum, if she were sitting on this couch as part of the podcast, and I told this story, but it hadn't happened to her yet, she'd say that was appalling. That's atrocious. That guy deserves to get slapped in the face. In real time, what happened was she went back to the guy's apartment and gave him a blowjob.
Not immediately. No, and again, it was
hour
playful.
Later, it wasn't weeks later.
I agree.
It was that night.
I know.
So here's what I'm saying. So this is a strong, well-educated feminist woman who in that moment had a guy open the conversation by saying, you have beautiful lips. I bet you give great blowjobs.
Yeah.
And she did not find it creepy.
Yes.
But would have said, that's the creepiest effing line that a guy could possibly start the conversation.
Sure.
Which is why what I'm saying is this is such a nuanced thing. And so it's especially, when I'm making a video, when you're not the person who's hearing the line from Craig Ferguson, but you're the person sitting at the computer, listening to me describe Craig Ferguson and then watching clips of him from afar.
Yeah.
It's just tough to give. I'm trying to figure out how one gives this advice in a way that people even believe it. Because that if I told her a month prior that would have happened to her, she would have said I was a lunatic.
Yes.
So the question is, how do I even package this in a way that is digestible? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't have the answer for you, but as I'm thinking through the problem is that the same thing, same word, same this is creepy from one person at one point in their life and not creepy and extremely attractive from another person. And part of what you were saying is that, okay, let's say that you're in that category of uncomfortable, low self-esteem guy that just didn't grow up being super cool in school. Yep. How do you move from the creepy column, which is like, oh, that guy's showing any level of interest is just, I'm not, even if he's just asking me on a date, it's not creepy, but it's like, how dare you deign or not? Why would I deign to go on a date with you? How do you move from that pile to the other pile if you're not allowed to at any point be creepy? Yep. Like if you can't, if like, it's kind of like, hey, you're not a talented shot in basketball. You need to make every shot for the rest of your life. You're not allowed to miss.
To bench press. You've never bench pressed before. I need you to bench press 225 pounds in 1 year.
Yeah.
But you can't do any push-ups or bench press. From now
it can only be 225. Yeah, it can only be 225.
It's like, well, wait, I can get there. I can do this.
Yeah.
I need a year of solidly working up to it with lower weight.
Yeah.
Or I need and I'm going to, by the way, the first time I try it, I might miss and I need a spotter, but eventually I'll get there.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you have to bench 225 and you can only bench 225, no spotters ever. That's an impossible task.
Well, I think what we're negotiating as a society, and clearly there's too far. Like if that guy, that worked, and you know what? He might have the fucking swagger and the eye and that has never gone poorly for him in his entire life. That's totally a possibility. Let's just pretend that it is. The question remains, what if you're not that
well, and the other
person.
Thing is, and by the way, I'm not even saying
you don't have to take that.
I've ever used
so sorry.
Like,
here's what I was going to say. There's got to be something in between. Give me a blowjob and
hi, can I buy you?
Hi, madam. You know, like, could I speak to your father and ask his permission to court you? And as a society, we're negotiating where that line is. But I think undeniable is that it's weird. You have to allow for some level of sexual advance to be rebuffed. You have to as a society. But it seems like we're increasingly getting to the stage where it's any sort of level of interest that it's that line is just moving back and back and back to you're not allowed to express that you are interested in me because that is creepy coming from you. Well, so now there's two piles of people that are getting farther and farther apart.
Even societally, even when I was growing up, we had this weird thing where it's like if you ask someone out and they say no, that's embarrassing to you. Your friends will laugh at you, or her friends will laugh at you, or something. Instead of a world where it's like, I find you attractive. Would you like to go out with me? No, thanks. I don't find you attractive. Okay, sounds good. Carry on, and then you walk away, and that, in my opinion, has to be considered a positive. Like, you had the courage, you asked, you respected her answer. That if that felt creepy to the person being asked out, to some extent, I think we have to go, that's okay. If the question is, hey, I like you and I think you're attractive, would you go out with me? No. I find it's creepy that you asked. Unless let's say it's not work, it's not any weird extent, they're not cousins. Like, throw out all the extreme circumstances. I guess you have to live in a world where creepy is okay some of the time.
Then work is even one of the difficult ones. Okay, let's say it's not her boss. Let's say it's her peer. This is where people meet, is in the workplace. You know,
I have so many friends that are literally married to coworkers.
So what, are you not allowed to ask a coworker of your same rank out on a date at this point? Well, only if you're the person that's going to get a yes is the answer. And this is the difficult thing. It's and unfortunately what we're doing, I watched a video of Mark Normand, who is a comedian. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's got that dry delivery.
He always says, I'm Kevin Hart, thanks and good night.
So he was on some radio show and they're talking about a plus size model and he was never heard of. And he goes, oh yeah, she's a cow. And everyone erupts. Oh, and he's never heard of her. He's just purposely cracking a joke. He's never seen her. But then he does continue to go on and he plays up the role of, no, not into that. No. For me, you know, he's got that whole delivery thing. And everyone in the room is laughing. Everyone in the room is laughing. I presume everybody on the radio is laughing. And he's going to get away with that. Now, maybe not for many more years, but what I see is society being, I was looking at the other guys in the room. I was like, if you said that, you're fired. If you say that, you're fired. He can say that. Why? Because he is in a protected class. But it's not that protected. And the protections are shrinking on the class of comedians. And we're increasingly split into two groups of people. There's the people that are capable of making racy jokes and have set up that, like, Dave Chappelle can say whatever the fuck Dave Chappelle wants, period, about anything. He's you know what I mean? Joe Rogan is getting there. But he's got the podcast. He can't say it with the wrong person. There's people that can crack jokes and there's people who are allowed none. And there's people that can ask on dates and say, you know, you would probably give a great blowjob and there's none. And then there's it's weird. There's this weird stratification of society, it seems like, at every level, income and who can crack jokes and who can say racy things. And it's like, if you don't know that you're in the category of the people that can, then you can't. Then you can't.
Well, my question, I guess, is what if you're trying to jump camps?
It's a dangerous time to do that, is what I would say. And I guess the solution is, if I had one and I could give advice or have a billboard to everyone, is to increase your threshold at what point you're offended as best you can, and increase the threshold at which point you try to end someone's career, get them a talking to, etc. But because there are people out there that don't do this, protect your physical boundaries, protect your job, protect your income, which is to say that if your boss is coming on to you and you think that your job is online, fucking protect yourself. You know what I mean? So I can see both sides of it, and it almost seems like the unintentional, or maybe, I don't know if it's intentional or not, consequences of trying to protect people from abuse from people in power, like the Cosbys, like the hey, you got to do this if you want to get on stage, you got to blow me type stuff, is that young men that are a little bit odd and uncomfortable are stuck, unable to jump from like, I don't know how to speak to a girl in a semi-sexual manner without being creepy, and I may never get the chance to learn because I cannot make a mistake.
No, and so what I'm trying to figure out is if there are these two camps, I'm studying someone who's clearly in the, when I say this stuff, it goes well 95% of the time camp.
Mm-hmm.
How do I give advice to both camps based on this person? You know what I mean? So that's what
you have the impossible job of speaking to an audience that you can't see. That's 200, 500,000, a million people.
Mm-hmm.
And your aim is to not piss any of them off. So what I would suggest is that, it's easy for me to say because I'm not making this video.
Well, I'll just say I'm Charlie before. Hey guys, this is Charlie.
That's Kevin Hart.
This is Charlie with Charisma on Command.
Change your aim is what I would say. Try to help.
Mm-hmm.
Consider men, consider women. You know what I mean? Like, try to do the utilitarian best thing that you could, considering that, like, look, if I give this piece of advice, a bunch of uncomfortable, awkward dudes are going to go ruin a bunch of women's days. So I can't go that far because that could be too easily misinterpreted, too easily spread. But also, I need to help the awkward 17-year-old crack a joke that is flirtatious, that is a little bit dangerous, that is a little bit...
I'll give a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit of a teaser. But I think the solution is I'm going to say, here's what he does. Here's an example. He misinterprets things.
Mm-hmm.
He, thankfully, misinterprets them sexually sometimes, but not sexually other times.
Mm-hmm.
So you, as a person, should learn this skill and figure out what you want to do it. But like, so sometimes people will say something and he'll, I don't know, Craig, I dropped the ball. And he's like, well, it's okay. Just pick it up and keep going. It's a sexual misinterpretation.
Yeah.
But other times this woman, Miranda Kerr, says, I play a little piano. Goes, do you play a small piano or a little bit of piano? You know what I mean? Just saying as if she's saying, I play a small sized piano. And so I'm just going to show both and be like, listen, this is what he does. He misinterprets, sometimes sexually, sometimes not. Both are funny. Sexual has the ability to create sexual tension. You run the risk of being creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. That's point one, is misinterpret.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're on to point two. So yeah, I'm going to try to pick things that can go either direction. Player's option, what way you want to do. I'm going to show examples of both. I'm going to try to find 5 things like that.
I think it deserves a final paragraph about intuition and social intuition and developing it, which is to say, look, I'm trying my best to give you an algorithm, but none exists, right? Like, for the right time, the right place, the this, the that, the lighting, if she's just out of a relationship and is really looking to get into it, like, I can't possibly do this. Mm-hmm. So what I encourage you to do, keep your eyes and ears open. Try to be a good person, just something on intuition at the end, which is a recognition that I can't possibly give you a playbook for all of this. I can give you principles and pointers and tell you how things might push you in one direction or the other. But
luckily, Craig does calibrate too. So there can be a point in there about how, like, this is him noticing he's gone too far, and pulling back.
Yeah,
like he doesn't bash down the door.
Yeah,
he knocks on the door. They don't answer. You go just pull back a little bit.
Sure.
So
no, I want to think more on this because it's like you said, it's fraught with so many different people are listening. Because I'm aware as I'm talking, I'm like, I'm talking to the young 17-year-old guy who's nervous, but I also have to be cognizant of the 30-year-old woman who has had her 35-year-old boss try to bang her in the office for a promotion. It's like, how do I possibly give advice about men and women that accounts for both of those situations and everything in between?
Well, here's the other thing. If I were coaching, I used to do coaching, one-on-one coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking to a guy and he's like, I've never asked a girl out. I've never said anything inappropriate.
Yeah.
I feel very scared of this. I'm like, we need to push you to do more.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking to a guy who's really loud and he's like, I constantly make sexual jokes and they go terribly.
They go over like the
less.
Hindenburg.
Like, I need you to not take things sexual for a week, never make a sexual joke, see if your results improve. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to custom tailor my coaching to fit the person. And if they're loud or if they're quiet, if they're sexual or if they're not, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, all right, well, the good news is this video will be seen by both of them and 300,000 other people.
Yeah. It's one of the cool but really difficult things, and this is what the Reinventing Organizations book. So we talked about spiral dynamics in a Patreon video. By the way, if you guys want to join, you can check that out.
Oh, is that Patreon only?
I think that was Patreon.
Yep.
Spiral dynamics. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Where is our Patreon? Patreon.com/
Charisma on Command.
Nice.
Yeah, it'll be in the description. But a brief. So we talked about the different stages of organizations. The one that we skipped over from orange to what this one calls teal is this green. With the green is everybody gets a vote, everybody gets a say.
Yeah, we're a family.
We're a family and love, and we will always find a way. And consensus is, pure consensus is the only way. That is an impossible aim.
Yeah.
And it's a utopian vision that always fails and is always frustrated. And I just think of that in terms of what you're doing when you're making this video is you just can't please everybody. You have
2% of people will not like it. I know that from the thumbs up, thumbs down. At least 2%.
No, some might hate it. Might hate it. So yeah.
Which means thousands of people. More people than I will see in a month will hate it.
Yeah.
No, and the other thing is with advice, the part that's tricky, again, it'd be much easier to do it for a video for one person. Is like, when you want to shoot a basketball, you want your elbow to be tucked in and you want to be 90 degrees from the thing, unless you're coaching Reggie Miller.
Yeah.
And then you just say, Reggie, your elbow is out by your ear and you are the best shooter ever. Just do your thing. Yeah. We're going to work on dribbling. You know what
footwork.
I mean? We're not even going to bother with, we're going to worry about getting you shots, but we're not going to touch your shot at all. If Reggie were trying to learn from YouTube, he'd be trying to pull his elbow in, even though he shoots the best percentage for threes of his generation or whatever it might be. So that's the mass education thing is something that just in general is always tough to be like. That's why Hugh Jackman's so great to cover. Everything he does is just good. You know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean?
He's happy. He smiles. He remembers your name. He makes eye contact. He treats everyone like his advice
is so much more broad
spanning. Everyone would benefit from learning from Hugh Jackman. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Robert Downey Jr., beloved, a little more nuance. Like now you got to be a little bit careful. If everyone tried to mimic Robert Downey Jr., not everyone would get better results than they currently get. Some people at first would miss and they'd be perceived as dicks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They would get it right if they kept trying and trying and trying. But yeah, there's some people when we do a video, it's just like, just try your best to be Hugh Jackman.
Harry Styles is one of those who's super charismatic, but it's tough to advise like when to be so laconic, when to crack. It's tough to do that. But I will even just for the sake of being pedantic, you're still thinking in an American context. Take Hugh Jackman to Egypt and be like, no, that's not.
I make videos in English. The Arabic guy can choose whether to translate.
My point is, there is no everybody. There's no piece. Smile. Somebody doesn't like smiles. I probably So there is no everybody. There's only what won't get the loud, angry internet people on you. And Hugh Jackman happens to not trigger that crowd of people, but it doesn't mean
sure. And weirdly enough, I have a friend who's similar to him who I've seen be very charming in a lot of European countries and South American countries.
Somebody doesn't like him.
We get translated into Russian. Our advice tends to. So actually, I think it's more cross-cultural than I would have initially thought.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that it couldn't go cross-cultural. I just meant that somebody doesn't like that friend.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody doesn't like him for exactly the reason that most other people do.
Yeah.
Can't please everybody is all. Ever with anything. Anything else?
Nope. No, that's it for today.
All right. What we got, Justin?
First question is, I just took a job in a mine as an equipment operator. My last position in a mine, I had one foreman who would constantly micromanage a colleague of mine. He would tell him every little thing and point out the obvious, and I had heard that there are similar problems at my new company. Is it difficult to use the radical honesty approach in a relatively macho environment with a person who has seniority to you, as they are liable to laugh or make fun of you for doing so? Do you have any advice for when you have to deal with someone who is micromanaging you excessively?
So one thing that this made me think of that I'm really happy is we've given conflicting advice at points. We've, be radically honest, but be practical about it. But except here, be totally radically honest. And we've done this with other things. And what I liked about the Reinventing Organizations book is it made me realize, and this is true of spiral dynamics as well, that what works is particular to a context. So radical honesty is really great for thoughtful, evolving people.
Well, we've talked about it. This guy, I just want to be clear, is his own boss.
Yes.
So he is radically honest 100% of the time, all the time, and he says it's the best way to live.
Yes.
He controls his own income. He is a therapist, I believe.
Yes.
His clients can fire him, but he cannot lose his job over it. And I'm not saying that means that he wouldn't be a good employee, but I do think it's important to understand where he's coming from.
We've used this example. You don't be radically honest when the Gestapo is knocking on your door asking if you have any Jews in the attic, and Anne Frank is up there.
Yeah.
You don't like, so
You
so
lie.
You lie. You absolutely lie. So everything, all the best advice, it can only thrive in a particular context. So I think the goal generally is to understand what context you're in and then see if you can edge it closer to ones that are, because it's just better to not live in Gestapo controlled Germany or wherever. So,
and for your happiness, you might be better off just finding a different company that paid you a little bit less money,
pissing your boss off and getting fired.
But where you weren't being micromanaged. So I'm not even saying pissing off your boss. I'm just saying, if you're like, wow, if I were radically honest, I would get fired because I hate this guy, then for your own sake, take a pay cut and go work somewhere where you don't hate the person, where you can be honest at work and it won't go terribly.
So let me draw two contexts for you. You've got the context of your workplace, which you know better than I do. And then you've got the context of your world. I'm presuming that you live in America somewhere. I'm presuming that you're watching this podcast. You have a level of education. You can read and write and have your faculties about you. What I would say is that if you look at the context of the world, America, where I presume you are in it, more radical honesty is going to be good, even if it gets you fired from this job. Because it might get, you piss the boss off, you stand up for that guy, he starts grinding you, you're like, I can't take this anymore. Now he's micromanaging me. I have to leave. Probably within the next couple of years, you will be in a better position for having spoken up about something that was pissing you off, because fortunately, most of us live in an America where change is possible.
One addendum, I would, if you see that as the path, just find a different job. I always think it's better to just get a different job and quit than get fired.
Oh, I'm not saying get fired. I'm just saying if he was honest with his boss and his boss took it really poorly. Mm-hmm. Within the context of your job, maybe let's pursue.
Sorry, I just want to, before you also might just be able to switch bosses within a company. You might be able to go above and just be like, listen, I can't blah, blah. I had this in one of my jobs. There was a boss I couldn't stand, and I just tried as hard as I could to work with the other bosses. Mm-hmm. So there's a way where you can maybe put yourself in a position where honesty won't be the death of you.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect that there's a way, and we've talked about this, where you can be practically honest. So radical honesty would be like, you're the biggest asshole that I've ever seen, and I can't. Like that's the true unfiltered feeling that I
would have punched you in the face. The only reason I don't is because I like my job and I don't want to go to jail.
Practical honesty might be setting up a meeting, be like, hey, can I talk to you? And then doing what we've mentioned, is like, hey, this is tough for me to say, and I don't know how to go about it. So he's listening. But I really only bring this up because I respect you, and I also respect this other guy and things, but I notice and I speak to this other person and he feels really micromanaged. And I think that he's capable of better work. I think he's capable of this, but I wanted to talk to you about it to see what you thought and see if you'd recognize this, because I do think it's a problem in your relationship and it might be actually hurting his performance and hurting the company. So there's a way to go about it that is practically honest, friendly. You get to a place where you are feeling more compassion for this boss rather than the knee-jerk anger or whatever. And it might be a macho environment. He even might take that the wrong way.
Have we ever codified the steps? Because I know we talk about this on the podcast all the time. Have we ever just labeled them?
I'm sure we have at some point. Yeah, but
might be worth doing.
We'll come up with maybe a patron sheet and just be like, go check it out.
How do I be honest a lot, and
how to have tough conversations.
Like, you acknowledge the person. You talk about facts and feelings. We should just try to codify what it is.
Sure. But that said, I think if you taking to a private place and doing the things that we've mentioned there is probably worth doing. And it might, I can't promise. It's a macho environment. This guy might have a really hard head. You might not execute it as perfectly as you want. And it might not go the way you hoped. But I think that if you're in a similar context to me, which isn't perfect, I've never been a miner, but at the end of the day, you will be happy that you had the guts to do it. So your self-esteem will rise. There's a chance that it makes things go much better. And it'll really, perhaps most importantly, your self-esteem will go up and you'll have looked out for somebody. So I think it's probably worth considering practical honesty here. Cool.
Next is from the same person last week that asked about who would do like quote unquote dirty jobs if everyone pursued their passion. And they wanted to rephrase their question. So they say the newer generation is increasingly focused on creating a business or doing freelance work, being a YouTuber, etc. And I wonder if this advice of do what you love, start a business is actually detrimental. Does this mean we should encourage more kids to go to college and get traditional jobs like our parents did? Or would all these kids try to do what they love and 90% fail and end up with normal jobs, therefore supply and demand balances it out? And as a follow-up, how do you still enjoy life if you do work that's not meaningful to you?
So my initial reaction is I think it's interesting to bucket entrepreneurs, people who are doing what they love, and influencers, because I would not do that. And I think if the world were focused on entrepreneurs and pursuing your passion, you'd probably end up with more physicists, chemists, more small businesses. You know what I mean? I actually think we've talked about this. To the extent someone wants to be an influencer, I don't think they're even really pursuing their passion. I think what they're pursuing is fame.
Yeah.
Because no one would, or not no one, a very small percentage of people would be making those photos or those videos if they weren't allowed to publish them to the masses. You know, I think Elon Musk pursued his passions when he was taking apart computers as a kid or self-teaching himself physics. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I would say, would society collapse if everyone 16 and under pursued being a Instagram influencer? Yes. Would it if everybody pursued being an entrepreneur or pursuing their passion without being so influenced by prestige, fame, or wealth generation? Might even be better off. So yeah, that's kind of my initial take on the first part of the question.
And well, the second half is some won't make it, right? I think the big thing with passion is to recognize there's no guarantees. You could take a crack, time might not be right, you might not be right, the idea might be half-baked. It's just nice to try. It's nice to give it a go, and at least feel like you know if it's in the cards. And you can always double back and try again.
For instance, like some people might just love cars. So they learn about cars. They become a mechanic. They open up their own mechanic shop. Well, we need mechanics.
Sure.
My car breaks down. I don't know how to fix it. That's not detrimental to society. That's plugging a hole that needs to be filled. You know what I mean?
I agree. And also it's like, well, who will clean up the trash? Well, somebody, I do believe this. So let's say that nobody out there wants to be a trash man. And let's say that if they had the support and education and freedom to do so, that they would all go solve and help with different problems. I think part of what is not being expressed here and what you talked about with the influencer thing is that there's a difference between passion and what people are driven to do. I think that the nice thing about passion is that if you really do it from you've taken your psychedelics, you've had therapy, you've done some breath work and you thought about it, you will want to help people. Like it will, at some point, it's cheesy, but that giving is the most important thing, sinks in a way that is you become passionate about. And so you will want to find a way to help the trash men not have to be trash men anymore, right? To create a world with less trash, or to have an automated recycling thing, or to like people will try to help people who need help. And so a lot of the jobs that exist that are undesirable, I think would start to become faded out as we solved the problems that they did. Now, it wouldn't happen overnight and it might not be across the board. But
I also think people are heavily influenced by fame and the pursuit of wealth. But if everyone was paid the exact same amount and no one was allowed to be famous, I think you would get people who genuinely wanted to be factory workers because it's interesting to be part of an assembly line, or who liked being mailmen because you get to talk to all these people and play with dogs and you're delivering them letters from loved ones and it might be rewarding. And they say thank you every time. Like,
well, the mailman one,
this idea of like these bad jobs being bad and the idea of an Instagram influencer being good, I think that's not about passions. I'm kind of repeating myself.
The one thing that I would disagree with, I agree with the mailman. I think I am a bit convinced by Marx that there's an alienation of labor when you become such a specific person in a machine-like organization. And so I think there's examples in the book that we've talked about several times today, Reinventing organizations, of people that work in factory lines, but they actually sacrifice efficiency of everybody does one thing to have people more involved at various stages to move around.
Dude, I can imagine working in a factory being dope, by the way. You got 10 guys you get along with, you're yucking it up all day while you build something with your hands.
And you take
and I get the same pay that these investment bankers get because we're living in this imaginary world. I'd way rather be a factory worker than an investment banker.
Sure.
This guy's going to sit in a cubicle alone and play Excel while I build something with my hands and talk to guys I like.
Yeah.
Like, no question.
The people, and it's a book, so it's got an agenda to make it look like they seem to really enjoy their factory jobs where they make car parts. They make this very specific car part and they make the best in the world. Every other thing is made in China, but they still have market share because they make the best and they love making the best. And there's the one story where they found an error in one of their pieces. And so got 2 guys on the line, got in the car, drove 8 hours to the person to go look through their stuff and be like, did we get you any other bad ones? They didn't. There was just one messed up one, but like they are artisans in that sense. Yeah. And so I do think that there is a way to if people start to pursue their passion, even the things that we don't like that are just very monotonous, routine, dirty, whatever, can transform or have elements added or subtracted from them that make them the work of a craftsman. Like even the janitorial services, I would say you can find ways to take pride in. And I'm sure that there's janitors out there that take serious pride in the work that they do. What was that story? It was from NASA. The story, I think it was JFK or one of the presidents, maybe it was Eisenhower, toured. No, because NASA came after. I don't know. It was one of those presidents in the 60s touring NASA, and he asked the janitor what he was up to. He said, I'm helping put a man on the moon. And he was like, he was dope. He was into it. Yeah. And so I think that there's a way for a more passionate world that doesn't devolve into everyone's an Instagram influencer. And I think there would
no
be...
Instagram influencers actually chasing their passion. That's my hypothesis.
One or two.
I'm going to toss it out there.
One or two are.
It's not that fun to do a photo shoot. It's not that fun to edit a photo. And 1% of people would do it if they had to, at the end of the day, hang it up in their own apartment. And the only people that could see it were friends that came by.
Or people that purchased it, which is how they made their money, like it was a work of art. In any event, yeah, I think there's a good distinction between
entrepreneurs, people pursuing their passion, and Instagram influencers. And then the other question was, how do you be happy if you have a job that you hate?
So I never asked that question. I'm fortunate. I asked, how do I get out of this job that I hate? Which I think, if you're asking for yourself, is definitely a better question, especially if you have the luxury of watching our podcast. That's the appropriate question for you. If you're thinking about other people,
well, certainly there's a way, because 2 generations ago, everybody just was like, work is work. It's how I provide for my family. I love providing for my family.
I don't think they hated it. I think that really this is the thing, and this is the marks, is that people didn't necessarily hate work. Life was hard, but farming and this and taking pride in what you do, there's something about that.
What is saying Marx or the fourth turning?
Karl Marx. No, Karl Marx's whole idea is that there's the alienation of labor occurs as men become smaller and smaller cogs in larger and larger machines, where they're doing widget. That's when people become despondent. But it's not that building metalwork is something people love. People love agriculture. They do all of these things, but what they can't do is one repetitive thing, one piece of it, to be more efficient in your production of whatever the output is.
Sure, I'll buy that, because someone could poo-poo farming, but we have a friend who is all about
botany and
doing botany,
plants and clips the top of the... People love that stuff. And so, and there's farmers, I'm sure, all over the world that really love what they do. So, yeah.
Next is, what do you think will be the emerging careers or industries that we will see coming up in the next few decades? And do you think it would be wise to go to university and pursue a degree in one of these areas because of the predicted growth of the industry?
So this is an area where I suspect you and I are not the best people to ask. There's futurists that are better positioned than us. I've read some of them. I'll try to recall. But what I would say is look at Peter Diamandis, Stephen Kotler. We had him on. He talked about some of this stuff. And it's your AI, your nanotech.
It's
AI and nanotech, VR. What I would suggest, and I think implicit in your question is that you want to make money. But I would reorient you towards, there's so much cool shit's happening. Do you want to go build the Matrix, but not the one that's dystopian with machines, but the one where you're Superman flying? Go do that. Do you want to help little robots cut cancerous tumors out from the inside of people's bodies? And then
and also, by the way, if your only pursuit is money, let's say there's AI, there's VR, there's nanobots, there's all this stuff, cloning, CRISPR, and you do have an interest in one, but you say, you know what, this other one is going to grow to be a bigger industry, you will be far less successful because you forced yourself into something you're not interested in. You're just going to get your lunch eaten by the guy who picked it because he is fascinated by it. You know what I mean? So I would say, if you're interested in futurism at all, pick the one that truly fascinates you. Our friend, for no reason except for that he loves it, is taking night classes in AI, teaching himself how to code. He got a leave of absence from his job to go full-time studying it. If you're not interested in AI, he's going to beat you up in the capitalist society. So I would say even selfishly, even though it's not the reason to do it, pick the one that will fascinate you, that will keep you up at night, that you'll want to study. And if it's none of them, I wouldn't just pick something, because the industry is going to blossom.
Yeah, this question with the last makes me think that we've had a cultural failure whereby so many people want to do Instagram and not so many want to build AI. Or like that's so much cooler. I think for anybody who sat to think about what it means, it's so much cooler. Now you don't get as famous, but if you got equally as famous from
this is the problem.
TikTok,
and they say if you want to get smart people to do something that's not in their best interest, to bait the hook with prestige. I fell for this. Dude, I thought Albert Einstein was fascinating at 6 years old.
Yeah.
I bought a biography that I couldn't possibly read because it was so complicated.
Special relativity.
college level physics to understand it. But I just was like, oh my God, amazing. Albert Einstein, coolest guy ever. I'm going to make a time machine. And then I get to college, and at that point, I kind of been burned out by how complicated the math is. So like, okay, I'm going to do philosophy. I'm going to be a writer. And everyone in the college, like the most prestigious part of our university is the Wharton School of Business. Mm-hmm. Literally the only reason I transferred in. Mm-hmm. And that set me on my path to be an investment banker, to be a private equiteer, and then eventually I escaped. But all I'm saying is I don't judge you, I don't begrudge you your questions. I did this. That's where I want to start with. But in hindsight, you'd love for people like that to stick with physics, to stick with what they're passionate about before they get told what is going to get them high fives from their community.
The breakdown that you kind of said quickly was in high school, actually, though. It was in middle school and high school where they made it completely unfun to be involved in physics.
Yeah.
Like horrible to be involved in any of that. Now, at some point, there is the unfun work of the math.
I liked math, dude.
It was just presented in a way that I think is far worse than it needs to be.
It was so dry.
It can be super cool to understand the way that stuff happens in the universe. And it was not. And I remember I had one teacher in 11th grade, or was it 12th grade, that was great and like reignited my interest in physics. But at that point, I'd already dropped down from the honors to the level below because I was just like, screw this.
If I was doing formulas to track, because I was trying to program, not even build a machine, program a machine that was going to shoot basketballs into a hoop, and whoever got the most shots in had a prize or something, or even just a celebration, I would have maybe been motivated to do the math.
Yeah.
But to do the math, to get to a number that I hand into a teacher who scores it out of 10 and hands it back to me, I'm like, I don't give a fuck about this. This isn't fun. This is so removed from reality at this point. You know what I mean?
Well, again, I brought it up because I'm super into it, but the book talks about a school, and it's okay. What are our presuppositions about school? That children hate learning, that if they're talking, they're not learning, that the best way to do it is in rows, that the most comparable thing about kids is the year that they were born, not their interests, not their level of development, none of that. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is that really what you think of kids? That they don't want to learn, that they can't learn while talking, that they can't learn from one another? I mean, the truth of school is, if I look back on it, it teaches you, I mean, I've got none of the math from high school. I've got the books that I skipped. I love reading. I Cliff Notes my way through the English curriculum because every book sucked.
Dude, I voluntarily, when I was a kid, would go watch Shakespeare plays, and then I would spark notes when we got assigned Shakespeare. This is something I was paying to go watch. And they're like, hey, read this. I was like, nah.
Yeah. And I understand, and I don't mean to... the organizations that we have now served a purpose, but it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And at least in some way. But they're doing it. Sal Khan has the Khan Academy. They're finding that, what do you know? Kids love reading, love learning, are fascinated by science and the natural world. I love animals, want to know everything. I was so freaking into animals, dude. I had every action figure, every animal, everything. I knew all the names I've since forgotten of all the different sea creatures. Man, they suck the love of learning right out of you. And it doesn't have to be that way. So we actually had someone, and this is why I'd like this idea of this organization. I started talking to people at different levels, and I spoke to one of our video editors. I had no idea. She is trying to create a curriculum for kids in the juvenile detention system that makes finances, budgeting, basic life skills interesting and available to them, and she's trying to do it in a interactive video game format. Now she's early along, but she's working with she's doing it on her own. And so anyway, it's like, wow, if we can make our organization somehow support and help her, not me take it over, that's still top down, that's still like help her do it, support her, so that she can help those kids, and that those kids, it seems like just a that the bottom up way, and trusting the people on the front lines, meaning the kids in the classroom, the people on the factory line, that much of the world is ready for that revolution now. Not everywhere. There's somewhere where you need tribal authority to get things in order, and that's why you can't go spreading democracy around the world like a lunatic, because it doesn't work without cultural structures. And
sometimes it gets a president you don't like, and then you have to send the CIA.
Into undemocracy.
Sorry, we wanted you guys to be a democracy, but we don't like the way you voted. So try again.
But yeah, so I forget what the question was.
We nailed it though. The question was like 7 minutes ago.
Cool.
We went astray.
All right, next is I've been into self-development for several years now, and I've improved a lot. However, I still feel unconfident deep inside. What should I do to change this?
Deep inside? So I'm going to presume we talked about the 2 mountains, that you have made strides in the first mountain, which is to say, pick your topic. You've learned your instrument, put on that muscle weight, performed better athletically,
gotten comfortable talking to the opposite sex.
And not comfortable, just like it goes well, even if deep down you don't feel it. So if that's not the case, pick a handful of first mountain things, which are like concrete, achievable behaviors.
Yeah, learn an instrument, get in shape, get more charismatic,
and get wins. I think it's important.
Sorry, when Charlie says, what do you mean when you say get wins?
I mean, learn the instrument and perform for someone and have them go, oh wow, I didn't know you could do that.
Right. If you're terribly out of shape, get into shape to the point where people remark
and go, oh wow, you look better. Have you been working out? Like those little things are, I do think, oftentimes a very important step of like, oh, I wasn't there. I set a goal. I took steps. I saw results. It's very, very important.
Yeah.
If you haven't done that, do that. If you have, and you're like, no, I've like made the business work. I've done this, but something's not right. Then you're on mountain 2, which is check out our emotional mastery course, and or psychedelics, and or therapy, or breath work, or those inside out things. And we've answered similar questions a lot, but if you'd like to ask for a specific recommendation based on your situation, write in again, but that would be my broad one.
Yeah, if you can afford it, I think our emotional mastery program is amazing. Justin will put a link to it in the description. If not, 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem is a good place to start, especially if you, to Charlie's point, your external world would have one think your confidence should be higher.
Yeah, and 6 Pillars is kind of like mountain 1-ish still, but it's still a very good book for anybody, I think.
So yeah, I'm just saying, if the guy can't afford $99 a month, then the book is $20 or whatever.
Correct.
Last one is, you have a lot of content catering to a vast amount of personality traits, but as an individual who watches almost all your videos, how can I figure out which few would suit me? Is there any method to choose which videos we can best watch to make the most of it and be the best version of ourselves?
Yeah, great question. I personally would say, what do you want to be like? Who interests you? You know, if I wanted to be, so like personally, again, no knock to him, like Robert Downey Jr. is amazingly charismatic. Everyone loves him. I find myself more drawn to wanting to be someone like Chris Pratt. So I would watch the Chris Pratt video, Chris Hemsworth. So like, I'd say, who do you see? We might do a video on Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr is hilarious, but I would not necessarily want to be him. You know, I think he has anger that he's worked through and publicly said he's worked through. And I don't necessarily want my humor to become his, because I think when your humor is Bill Burr's humor, you have to adopt Bill Burr's mindset, which is generally being outraged by things. So yeah, I would say, who do you want to be like? And then go through the catalog of our videos and find their image where people like them.
Yeah. Maybe we can make some playlists. We have talked about charisma types. You could check out a video. I forget what it's called. 5 types of charisma.
I think if you just write charisma on command, charisma types,
you might want to check that out. And we do talk about it. And all of them are great. They can all work. They all have slightly different ways. You've got, like, Oprah Winfrey is not going to connect with someone like Conor McGregor does. You're going to have a different feeling. Oprah's going to make you cry. Conor's going to make you respect him.
But they all have, to our point, no one is going to like all of them, but they all have great reactions from the outside world. So I don't think there's a hierarchy of them. It's really just like, do you want to be the cool, aloof guy? Do you want to be the laughs all the time, smiley guy? Do you want to be the make eye contact and connect with people deeply Oprah type? Like, what what would make you happy based on your desire? You know, how do you want to carry yourself in the world? That would be the question I would ask myself.
Yep. Very good.
That's it for normal questions.
Dope.
Who's your person or group of people that you're like?
I love Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
He's great. Chris Pratt. Who else have we done? I like Chris Evans a lot too.
Mhm.
He's the most underrated for me. It's funny that he gets so overlooked, but he can't do it. Chris Hemsworth is great.
Yeah.
All the Chris's are dope in that series. And then similarly to you, I don't aspire to the Robert Downey cool.
Don Draper,
cool. Just like, wow, that's a badass, and like what an amazing cutting remark that he made as he left the room. I like the humorous, friendly guys.
Yeah, me too.
Cool. But everyone, thank you so much. And I just want to say, we often ask people to join Patreon, but thank you to our patrons, who I know many of you have made it this far. You're helping Justin get out of the hood.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to join the Patreon, that's of course in the description, emotional mastery, all that stuff. But that's it for today.
All right.
Also, guys, hopping back in here because I had the opportunity to ask a handful of questions of Sadhguru, who is a mystic. He's an Indian mystic. He runs the Isha Foundation, which is super cool. So I asked him a handful of questions. He came back because he is traveling with those answers, and we have those for you here now. I hope that you enjoy them. Hey, Isha Foundation and Sadhguru, thank you so much for the chance to ask you a few questions. So I have a YouTube channel. We talk about how to be more charismatic and confident, how to be a better leader. So I have 3 questions for you, 2 from my audience, 1 from me. And the first one has to do with your foundation. So obviously you've got tons of people all around the world, basically a volunteer army that is running and managing this organization. And I'm curious, what do you think has drawn so many people to you? Now, obviously there's a spiritual component, but it also seems that the way that maybe you tell stories or the joy that you seem to radiate has drawn people to you. So for lots of people out there in my audience who might be interested in being a bit more magnetic in their personality, I'm curious if there's any specifics that you could share that would help them with that.
Namaskaram. About, there are many people who achieved many things in their lives, many great people. So people can stand away from them and gawk at them, maybe see them as an aspiration for their own lives. But when it comes to me, I'm not a great person in this world in any way. It's just that when people are with me, they feel great. I always saw that that's more important than me being great. So I'm as ordinary as it comes, nothing special, very ordinary, but making sure when people are in touch with me, they feel great. Maybe that's the key. Why people are drawn, all sorts of people, young people, old people, every kind. Because it's not just those people who consider themselves holier than thou kind of spiritual seekers who come to me. Every sort of human being is drawn because I make sure they feel great when they're with me.
The second question also has to do with the organization. Obviously it's huge, it's sprawling, it's all around the world, and like I said, it's a volunteer organization. So I'm wondering how involved you are with the logistics of the organization, or if you've been able to attract people that can manage it. Because I run a small business and it seems very challenging just to get 10 or so people who are being paid all moving in the same direction. To have thousands and thousands of volunteers, I'm curious, organizationally, is there a person that you've drawn to you that's able to do that? Is it just a hands-off approach and everything sort of works out, or do you find that you have to almost run it a bit like a corporation? I'm very interested in the line that you have drawn in terms of how to get such a large organization functioning so smoothly.
Well, there's millions of volunteers and thousands of things to manage on a daily basis. It's just that I've ensured that people are sufficiently inspired and they will do their best. They may not be doing the best, but they're doing their best, and that's all that matters to me. I don't demand anything more, it's just that you must be full on. Well, what you're doing, there may be somebody else who can do it better. It doesn't matter, but you're doing your best, that's all that matters to me. And whatever you're doing, it must mean something to you. You must show absolute involvement. This is all I look for, no great qualifications. Because life needs involvement, not qualifications. The only way to experience life, to know life, is with absolute involvement. And in being involved, one will see life's experience becomes profound, and that's what makes people be a part of the foundation. And there are also tools, very powerful tools for self-transformation, and that definitely is the key. I must tell you this, I was conducting a 2-day retreat for the top 25 executives of a multinational company, which has a very large presence in the world. I had 9 volunteers and they were doing whatever they were doing. Our volunteers are all full on, always. And after a day, these executives looked at the way they were functioning and said, "Sadhguru, where do you get such people?" Because they're always looking for attrition. I said, "You don't get such people, you got to make them." They asked, "How do you make them?" I said, "You must make them fall in love with you." They said, "How do you do that?" I said, "First you must fall in love with them." Then they say, "Oh, they don't pay us for that." So, this is not work, this is a love affair. So it goes on. Well, it has its ups and downs, but because it's a love affair, all is fair in love and war, so this is love.
And then the third question is actually one that I have personally, and it has to do with giving. So I have had experiences where giving is very joyous and I like it, but a lot of the time I feel like when I'm being charitable or doing what I know is right in any given moment, it's not always fun for me. So I'm wondering if you have any advice to get more into the spirit of giving, such that it's a joyous, fun act rather than something feels like a moral obligation or a chore.
About giving, what is there to give? Everything that we have, including every cell in this body, we have taken from this planet. Well, because we can't take it and go somewhere, whatever we have, it's wise to share. Let's not make a big deal about sharing what we have gathered. None of us came with anything in our hands, so we only have taken what we have taken. It's wise to share. It's human to share. Let's not make too much out of giving, as if we are giving something. No, we are not giving nothing. We have taken, it's good to share. If you share, your life will be beautiful. Somebody else's life may be a little comfortable. It's great. Thank you very much.
Also, if any of you out there are interested in taking a deeper look into some of our courses, I highly recommend checking out Charisma University. Charisma University is a step-by-step curriculum with a daily action guide, so there's no guesswork when it comes to learning the charisma habits. You just follow the guide and you get the results in 30 days. There's also a 60-day refund period for any reason, which means that you can really decide if the course is worth it to you. And the best way to describe the course is just to let the members speak for themselves. The first one comes from a guy who got promoted to a senior position early in his career. answer. And he says, I don't even have a bachelor diploma, yet they want me to fill this position, and when asked why, this was the answer. You have great social skills, which is rare for an engineer. You can think quick on your feet, and you are open and self-assured in your demeanor. Thank you so much for all that you've taught me. You have truly changed my life, because without CU, I wouldn't have qualified for that position in a million lifetimes. Now, this next one comes from another person who started a new job, saying, I wanted to let you know that I nailed those first days at work. Everything that I needed was right there at the right moment. The confidence, the energy, the smile, the positive mindset, and all with your tips from last Tuesday in mind, it could just not go wrong. And he finishes by saying, I just wanted to emphasize that what I did the previous days would not even have come to my mind if I had not discovered that charisma is a skill that can be learned thanks to your YouTube channel and university program. And this last one is a comment in the course from someone who used it mainly to improve their social and dating life. And he says, life-changing. In 6 weeks, I went from being socially awkward with few friends to the life of every event I attend. I also went from having serious girl problems to dating the girl of my dreams. Charisma University transformed me from a lonely introvert hoping to better connect with people to an energy-filled extrovert who makes new friends everywhere I go. And there are more success stories just like those in the comments if you decide to join the course.